Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the tragedy that happened at a Minneapolis school and, involved, cross-dressing gunman opening fire on a crowd of people, I believe behind stained glass windows, so, he couldn't actually see the people he was shooting at, but nevertheless opened fired, killed two, wounded several others, and hopefully none of those other people in critical condition have died or will die. And, we want healing and recovery for those individuals. But anyway, we're going to discuss this because I do think it is a dark story and it's a reminder of, in my opinion, of the supernatural. Like it does exist, and you best start believing in a supernatural world because you are living in it. So that's kind of my takeaway from this entire thing. It's, to me, a little bit different than some of the other events that have happened of a related nature at a related venue. And this one, I think, has a lot more of a supernatural bent to it. Like, I don't think Audrey Hale in the Covenant school was on this level of supernatural. I just think that was just an evil liberal. But I do think that this is more or less someone who delved into some supernatural forces. So that's one reason why I want to talk about it. And it does seem like that religious schools are increasingly becoming the target of these types of events. And I think you note that in your article that you wrote on the subject last night. So that being said, how are
Well,
you?
doing good, all things considered. But yeah, I did note in the article that the trend of shooters early on was that they were more like men that were more or less on, psychotic, antipsychotic, or some form of SSRI medication. And then it's increasingly becoming more feminine and more gay as far as the profile of a lot of these shooters go, especially post 2020. That seems to be more of a trend. And one thing I've learned lately is that a lot of the way that high profile killing in America happens is it is very much a zeitgeist. It is very much a trend in a lot of waves. Like the serial killer wave that was very popularized in a lot of media, that's also largely died down. Where now you're seeing like the serial killer kind of peaked in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, and it's kind of died down in the subsequent years. And obviously, the mass shooting it kind of supplanted the serial killer as being the I guess the premier form of like mass killing, if you want to put it that way. So that is one thing that I've noticed with the serial killers, and then now you're seeing it more trend towards religious schools, and obviously, pretty gay or trans shooters are being increasingly the norm.
Yeah, and it kind of struck me like this guy is like the profile of one of the liberal agitators from the pre-Spanish Civil War, except, there's a lot more to it than that. But otherwise, like, okay, this is someone who hated his heritage, did not hate his parents. We'll get into that later, but it's definitely someone who hated, Christianity and what it stood for, and took action to that. We got to remember, like in the Spanish Civil War, one of the things that was more provocative about it was the fact that they would dig up the and desecrate the body of nuns. And again, not into monastic practices of Catholicism here, but they're not doing that because they're not doing that to make a commentary on the specific dogmas of the Catholic Church. They're doing that because in Spain, at least, the Catholic Church is as much of a symbol of Christ. That's their way to hate Christ, is they hate on the Catholic Church, and that's what they're doing. It's
Yeah,
kind
I
of like in
mean,
Australia, Hillsong. It's like, okay, they catch a lot of flack for you know the wrong reasons because uh, it's not really about Hillsong. It's about, or the finer doctrines of Christianity. It's about taking any shot you can against
they got a
Christ.
cross out on the door, and they're
Right.
they're a target. And again, I've said this.
Joel Osteen, same thing.
Yeah, I've
Even
said
though
this
the guy's a
before,
false teacher.
that in Revelation the beast doesn't like the whore just as he doesn't like the church. So the beast doesn't the and the principalities and the powers of this world don't like the false churches just as they don't like the real church. And regardless of your thoughts on Catholicism, and again, I'm not one of them harsh Protestants when it comes to Catholics. So, but regardless, even if I were, I would still have to recognize that the how the doctrines of the Catholic Church being specifically are not relevant to why a shooter would want to shoot them up.
Yeah, and it's not like Protestant churches or Catholic churches are unique in this phenomenon because Protestant church or Protestant schools have also had this happen as well. Most notably, the Covenant one, which we alluded to, but you also wrote about and reminded me of the one that happened back in December.
Yes.
Was that in Michigan or Wisconsin? I can pull the article up,
Yeah,
but
I got the article I wrote. It was Abundant Life Christian School, which was in what state?
Michigan or Wisconsin.
Yeah, Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And again, that was a non-conforming like women or femcel shooter who was actually ironically inspired by, or possibly inspired by a Twitter account that simply disappeared at the time, but has since reemerged.
Yeah. So yeah, and again, I don't remember as many details about that. I mean, you read a lot of these manifestos, and I think maybe we talked about that manifesto at the time, but the manifestos are usually just gibberish, and there's not a coherent thought. They're just the ravings of someone who's delusional, and you know, I say this all the time, like in person. When I talk to my wife, and this is something I say all the time. Like most violent crime, there's no purpose in it. There's no like most homicides. There is zero motivation for them. Like it is, someone's at the wrong place at the wrong time, or
Corner,
it's just a
corner
random violence. Maybe a Boondocks episode, so type of event. Like there's not. It's not like, oh, this person was cheating on my husband or cheating with my husband or whatever, and so they got capped. No, that's way too logical for most homicides. Was that there was a slight that someone overreacted to? That's way too logical when you're describing most homicides. And in this case, we had a shooting at a school. There's never a logic behind it, and uh, you're either talking about someone that's like insanely evil, or just someone that actually is demonically influenced or possessed. And I would argue that this is definitely someone who, in my opinion, leans more towards the possession. Uh, that's based on the ravings of their goodbye letter, so to speak, their self deletion note. So it's just loaded with irony, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But and that's kind of what stands apart. Whereas Audrey Hale or whatever, uh, she was just liberal, didn't like the parents or whatever, didn't like the church, and
Yeah, Audrey Hale had more of a like hatred
there's a lot. Yeah,
for the church, and obviously even like an anti-white hatred as well. And that was also, and then there was more of an anti-human um, manifesto
like an
with the
anti-natalist messaging, right?
no with the Abundant Life school, Christian School. That's the Madison, Wisconsin shooter. So that one was more just generally anti-human hatred of mankind. So again, those are some of the trends that you see in these manifestos. And again, you are dealing with someone probably on SSRI medication, antidepressants, which means that one of the symptoms or side effects of those drugs is suicidal ideation. So they kind of become zombified, and then they start manifesting suicidal thoughts. So perhaps that's just a way to feel something when they feel nothing. But yeah, killing a bunch of people is kind of a way for them to, I don't say feel something, but that might or that would maybe make their suicide or their I guess attempt on themselves to have, I won't say more purpose but more gravitas. But yeah, there is an a hatred of humanity, not just a hatred of self, that seems to be evident in a lot of these manifestos. And again, it doesn't even matter what the particular words are. It's just what are the trends, what are the consistencies.
Yeah.
But yeah, this
And
one is different in that the parents are not like, I guess, recipients of the hate.
yes, and that I thought that was very interesting. Like the dude thanks his parents and says they did a good job and that they should just forget about him. Which you know what, uh, if the person was under 18, I would say that the parents should be executed. They should be charged with the murders and executed for the crimes of the child, because they would have been a minor, so only responsible for the minority of their actions. And in this case, the parents, they affirmed the direction of their son. And the evidence for that is the fact that the mother, I believe back in 2020, petitioned while the guy was a minor at the time for a name change. So the parents were clearly on board with the transgenderism, and might not mean they were on board with the rest of the stuff, but they clearly were supportive. They clearly pushed this person into that direction, and also you know and tried to basically love their way out of the problem, and it didn't work.
Yeah, and it is weird that the mother worked at the school at the time. The father is listed as a non-applicant on the form, but obviously I think I saw a Facebook post of him essentially affirming on like a like a birthday affirmation on an affirmation on the son's birthday. So I saw that, but yeah, I mean the mother was the primary, I guess, petitioner of the name change, which
I mean, I think they might
typically
only need one for a
I
minor.
assume that's the case, but
So let's dive into the article that you wrote. You kind of open up with the just a brief overview. August 27th, transvestite shooter Robert Westman attacked Annunci- Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis, murdering 2 students and injuring 17 during what was supposed to be a celebratory back to school mass at 8:30 a.m. Westman self deleted on scene. He was 23 years old. Like most of the recent shooters, Westman had an online footprint, which included a YouTube channel where his content was archived before YouTube purged it. His videos exemplify how disturbed he was, where he would record these video blogs, which contained various unhinged statements in a 22-minute video. He flips through manifesto pages while occasionally muttering, but towards the end, has a drawing of him looking at the mirror and seeing a devilish figure. The manifesto is written with the Cyrillic alphabet, but with English phonetics, which I thought was very interesting that he's trying to write in English using a phonetic alphabet. Uh,
yeah, that's why a lot of the words just don't. It looks like gibberish. That's I again, someone else figured out the code. I didn't, so I
yeah,
I didn't go too deep into what people were translating it to be, just because it wasn't really consistent across the board within the time frame of, I guess, writing the article. But yeah, it is important to note that, like, anytime these things happen, like, people are rushing to find out who it was and what they can learn about them, and then it's just like, oh, the social media sites purge it.
yeah, that's definitely a pattern. Not a fan of that pattern. Speaking of, does the Daily Wire still maintain its policy of never naming a shooter?
I know that was Ben Shapiro's thing. I didn't know if that was Daily
I
Wire.
think it was a Daily Wire policy, and I know that Candace Owens frequently, didn't follow that, didn't abide by that, which it was a stupid policy at the time. This is not, you're not actually addressing the issue. You're actually just burying information that could actually be helpful. And it's just not news reporting. Like, you got to say who did it, and you can't just pretend like this person doesn't exist. Uh,
Now, one thing about the videos and just some of the noise, is that he does make a lot of just unhinged like ramblings, mutterings, like it's just some of the weird mannerisms that he says and how he says it. It's almost like you're listening to the Joker inside Arkham Asylum and how he talks and like how he's kind of laughing at what he's about to do. So it is very much like a Batman villain.
Yeah, and I find the image to be very interesting. It took me a little bit of time to notice that. Okay, oh, that's a mirror, because I just thought he's just walking up to like one of the Zoltar machines, and and that's he's consulting that. No, it's actually how he sees himself in the mirror, and I think again, there's I think this picture might be like a tacit admission of demon possession, but because he sees it, and the vampire doesn't appear in the mirror, so there's something going on. There's something being depicted in this. I don't want to call it artwork, but it is technically more art than what goes for modern art these days, because there's actually meaning conveyed here.
It
And
certainly is an image of how he sees himself.
right, and the devil in the mirror or whatever is how he sees himself. Does that mean that he's demonically possessed, or just self-aware about how bad he is? I actually do lean towards the latter after reading the self-deletion note. I think he is. There's demonic possession at work here, and even there's some reluctance in doing evil, but he is trapped and must do it. So that's how I read the note. So I don't know if you had a different read of that, but this picture, I think, super. What's the way to put it? It's kind of like a super summary of this person as a whole. Uh, they look into the mirror, they see the devil, because, in my opinion, demonic possession is still real. So I don't know if you have anything more to add.
Yeah, I mean, I do know that obviously if you play with certain Satanism and satanic practices, you will attract certain entities. So this might be a case of that's something that maybe it's in the Cyrillic translations, the suicide note. I've seen some depictions say it was, or have certain allusions to like him feeling called or him feeling like foreign, I guess, entities like attacking him or whatever. So I mean, I've seen that inside some of the translations, but again, I'm not super trusting of that just right now. But yeah, if you do, play with fire, you get burned in this case. And in this case, yeah, of how he sees himself. So
I mean, the self deletion is, I think, probably the more. I think that's the more interesting thing. But I think before we get into that, we can kind of go through like all the images that were on the guns and all that. I don't have one of those pulled up at the moment, but
it
uh,
would be in the video, but yeah,
yeah, we're not going to do the
I
video
do
because
talk
I've
about
already
that.
gotten a tip that like two channels have gotten nuked
It should be in
trying
the
to play the video,
it should be in the article on some
the video,
on the
or
weapon on what's written on the weapons.
oh, okay, yeah,
The next paragraph below the picture,
okay, below this picture,
below the picture of the drawing,
okay.
the one you didn't read.
Yeah, so on the day of the shooting, Westman posted a 10-minute video where he shows himself preparing to shoot the place that is a school. He makes a statement apologizing to his parents, saying, "I regret everything. I didn't ask for life." He shows.
Let me just interject right there. I think the next sentence after that was, "You didn't ask to die." I think that's what he says. So I didn't ask. I didn't ask for life. You didn't ask to die. I think that's the next sentence. But it was a little like he was kind of like trailing off a bit.
So he shows a target dummy with the picture of Christ placed at the head before showing his magazines, which have inscriptions of as "Where is your God?" and "Kill Donald Trump." There's even reference to the Jews, India, Epstein, and the names of other school shooters written on the weapons. And I think this is actually something that people are glomming onto. In my opinion, there's a lot of focus being placed on uh, the writings on the guns, because I think they are. It's just anything and everything, that someone who just who lives. I don't want to say in meme culture, but there's a lot of stuff there. Like even like, and I would say if you're familiar with like the Lost cartoon, like there's a reference to that, which you could read that as anti-abortion, because it presents abortion as a very sad and just depressing, bleak thing. So there's that cartoon referenced on the drawings and stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's just said. A lot of it's just memes in a way, bad memes for the most part. But there's not really an ideology presented or like a
I mean,
worldview presented. It's just I'm
I
trying to be as offensive as possible to as many people as possible. Is kind of my read.
okay, because I describe him as like a cross between like Antifa and QAnon, because he does reference Epstein and he says like kill all pedos on like that's written on one of the things, and then he actually I think he has the release the list, the words release the list, which I'm assuming is the Epstein list. So he has that. Obviously, then he's like Antifa with like a lot of the the stuff about the Jews. I mean, Jew gas for smoke grenades is kind of comical if you think about it. But yeah, obviously, there's the 6 million wasn't enough written on there. So again, he has that. He has Nuke India, which I thought again a little also funny. But yeah, he a lot of it is just like edge lord, but it's like every edgy statement from every like
Yeah,
online.
there's no coherent direction of where this guy actually stands on any issue. It's just trying to be offensive for the sake of being offensive, and ultimately, doing what's horrendous and unconscionable.
Which might even
Conscionable.
be why the fascination with the Cyrillic alphabet, because it's like Eastern European, it's Soviet Eastern Bloc, maybe even a fascination with like Russia or Putin, or even just like the Ukrainian Nazi soldiers. So maybe there could be even deeper, I guess, edginess to why the obsession with the Cyrillic alphabet.
So Michael asked whether the picture in the mirror is the demon Molag. I wouldn't know. I'm not.
I've saw someone say Baphomet, but yeah, I'm not a demon expert,
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, uh,
and neither there are those deliverance ministry people.
yeah, and where is Greg Locke when you need him, right? This, he could have totally stopped this, right? Or is it just an entire? Is it? Are these deliverance ministries just entirely scams? Because how many demons are just walking up to churches to get delivered out of a body? It doesn't seem realistic. It would seem realistic if you went to them, but even the story that Sean Foyt told that in India seemed more believable. That and that story kind of seemed very embellished, but even that story seems more believable than any of these deliverance ministries. Uh, and then yeah, incoherent, offensive garble, and that has caused like a lot of Jews to get in there and make it about you, and I guess Jewish victimhood, even after two, Christians are murdered and several others injured, the Jewish victimhood says this is about us, and it's just no, it's not. The guy was just fed posting with his drawings. There's nothing. Again, it was just offensive for the sake of being offensive, and there's nothing there. He passed up multiple opportunities to attack your people. Instead, he attacked a Catholic school. Like that was a clear target. Like he passed up multiple opportunities to attack your people, and instead, went after the Catholics and other people, well-meaning people that just want to send their kids to not public school under the governor of Tim Walz, who very creepy dude, but yeah, I would send my kid to Catholic school before a public school in Minnesota. Um, if we're doing would you rather. So yeah, in a sense, he was going after our people here. So yeah, I guess Jews are all Catholic now. No, no, no. Catholics don't get to have that
I mean,
chosen people
if you listen to
complex.
if you listen to E. Michael Jones, he would say like the Catholics are the chief enemy of the of that group. So that's like opposite. So like that's like the opposite of the Jew is the Catholic.
Man, what is that Elijah Schaefer clip where the person they did like a debate on this
Yes, with
and
King. I think David King.
Gavin something, I forget his
Or
name.
Gavin McInnes was on there,
Yeah, I
but
never got into
it
him.
was his partner on the debate
Yes,
that said he would Thanos snap all the Catholics before the
all the
Muslims.
Muslims, and he's like, bro, we were supposed to be on the same side. He's like, he knows what's up, and people don't realize that Islam is the broom of Judaism. So, uh, this is an interesting tie-in. The murderer in the Idaho 4 murders is also possessed by multiple demons. You can see it in his eyes and face. And yeah, that's a good tie-in. I wish I knew more about that case. I remember that being huge, but I just never got into. I just couldn't get it. I never got into that story. Uh, but yeah, there's definitely certain homicides that I get very fascinated by. I haven't brought this up in a while, but I have seen a few murder trials, different parts of different trials and stuff like that back in the day. And yeah, a lot of interesting stuff happens in those things.
So let me just point this out. E. Michael Jones doesn't know his head from a hole in the ground. Again, I don't disagree with that, and that is one of the things that is very kooky about E. Michael Jones.
I feel like it's because he's based on one thing and not and like very cringe on another, and it's like you'd think there'd be more coherence. But you know what? You know what? James White has no problem with Doug Wilson talking to E. Michael Jones. Let's just leave it at that, So, getting back into it, like, I don't think the writing on the guns has anything to do, is really all that relevant. People want to make it more relevant than it actually is. But I think the note here is the more interesting factor. And it begins by saying, I don't expect forgiveness and I don't expect any apology I have to hold much weight. But to my family and to those close to me, I do apologize for the effects of my actions. My actions will have on your lives. Please know I care for you all so much, and it pains me to bring this storm of chaos into your lives. This will affect so many more people than the ones that are immediately involved. So, yeah, I mean, again, a lot of moral cowardice. Like, there's preemptive regret here, which I think lends credence to demon possession. Uh,
Again, that was not my initial analysis reading the letter.
what, the demon or the preemptive regret?
Well, the preemptive regret leading to or being a sign of possession. I didn't connect those dots.
The second paragraph was where I suspected that the parents were gay affirming. And it says, to my mother and father, I'm sorry that I didn't turn out as you had hoped, obviously. Uh, they wanted a son here. Anyway, you did not fail me. You gave me so much. I truly appreciate the love you have given me. I feel I was raised to be a good person. I've kept those traits of empathy, self sacrifice, and good character. Please do not think you have failed as parents. I gotta pause right there because we just gotta, like, the only self sacrifice even remotely here is the fact that he self deleted himself instead of reloading or whatever. Like, there's nothing. There's no. He didn't keep any of the traits instilled by him or instilled into him according to what he says
Again, even his
they
traits are
did.
a rather weak list of virtue. I've
I mean,
kept
self sacrifice is good.
sure, but you know, perhaps that's the only one that a good character just means nothing. It's kind of like when the liberal says that I'm a good person, like that's their entire state of being is they don't really have like a moral system, so they just kind of appeal to this notion that I'm a good person, which again, if you want to know how prevalent this is, just watch the movie Inside Out 2, where that's what the writers of the movie have Riley, the girl Riley, tell herself is she's a good person.
Yeah, what was a
That's like her. I don't even know, but
self image or whatever it was called in the movie?
yeah, but like again, that's a liberal mindset.
Right.
That you see that in a movie, just just to give people a real example, and then this you kind of see a little bit in the letter. I have good character. What does that even mean?
So, and then he goes on to say that he was corrupted by the world and have never learned to hate what life and have learned to hate what life is. Life is love, life is pain. There's too much to accept, too many things to put up with just to live. I'm tired of this pain the world gives out. And again, uh, then there's a plea to forget about him and stuff like that. Uh, and it's first to the parents and then to the siblings. So he blames the world and the corruption of it. But I gathered from that, the parents were as gay affirming as you could be, and it didn't. If they were just a little bit more transphobic, uh, this might not have happened.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's kind of like the Chris Rock test, where it's just like, there's not a whole lot of signs that you messed up as a parent, but in this case, if your child, shoots up a school, I think you obviously failed as a parent.
Yeah, there are some things I think are objective, uh, that make you an objective failure as a parent, and obviously this is one of them. This is definitely S tier on the tier list of things that make you a bad parent or a failure as a parent. Uh, at least with the Adam Lanza and Sandy Hook, at least the mother, she was basically the first one to get it. So I actually am more sympathetic towards her because she was, she went down with, she was killed too. Uh, so, but everyone else, a lot of these other people, and I forget, weren't there people that were charged? Like, weren't there parents of a shooter that were charged? Maybe also in the Wisconsin, Michigan area. But
That one I don't know.
so So then there's, I love you, I feel hope within you, and it's like, oh, all the good memories and stuff like that. So again, a little bit meaningless in retrospect. It doesn't mean anything. And, then there's a note to the pain, that's, pain towards friends. So apologies to friends. And then, I've wanted this for so long. I'm not right. I'm a sad person, haunted by these thoughts that do not go away. I know this is wrong, but I can't seem to stop myself. I'm severely depressed and have been suicidal for years. Only recently I've lost all hope and decided to perform my final action against this world. I don't want to kneel down for the injustices of this world. Wants to die instead. Rather die on the feet and then live on the knees, constantly in pain. So, is that like a reference to Colin Kaepernick, kneeling down, taking a knee?
I would say I missed the stone toss comic of being like the one that's on your knees, and it's just like at least whatever.
No, I don't think it's that.
Uh, but I mean, yeah, there is a. I mean, the reference to the injustice could be a reference to, like, liberal perceptions, and if you wanted to describe motivations, because the manifesto did have like a gay sticker on it, so that could be what the injustice is.
Yeah. And then he compares himself to someone who's been dying of cancer.
Yeah, he actually insinuates that vaping leads to lung cancer, or he thinks he has lung cancer from vaping. I mean, it also could be a sign of like panic attacks if he can hardly, like, if you can hardly breathe or you're struggling to breathe. It's not really that you are struggling; it's just that it's a panic attack, and that
This guy thinks he's Tony Soprano. That's what you're saying?
I'm saying yes, he could be undergoing such symptoms, and then he equates those symptoms with cancer.
Transvestite Tony Soprano. Just as
Or
convincing.
his vape is causing him bronchitis or something, so it could also be that.
Yeah, and yeah, the part about the cancer part comparison is just, I think that part's just particularly disgusting. Uh, and then it says that the family was all that kept him going. Finds no more interest in anything material, only have an interest in the mission and love for my family. And what? What the my mission and love for the family. So I guess the question is like who gave him the mission. I would have been if I didn't have such an amazing group of people around me. I would have been gone much sooner. Just want to escape from the world, escape from the constant bills, shitty jobs, shitty people, and injustice of America. So America is the injustice. Uh, Again, people like to complain about this country, but name a country that you can you look on the map. I look at I kind of keep tabs on what's going on in most countries that matter. That is, sorry, Gabon. Uh, America, there's the most hope for America than any other nation on earth, and I don't think there's a particularly close second. Ireland, maybe. There's hope for Ireland. There's hope for a place like Hungary. Oh, obviously El Salvador would be, that would be a nation that's on the right track. But that's because they have a dictator El Presidente. That's why they're on the right track.
So I will
Go
say
ahead.
with this paragraph, the I find no more interest in anything material. So that actually is a huge sign. It's just like when you try to make a purely materialistic world, it just ends up failing and collapsing on itself. Obviously, this is just one extreme outcome,
But
but
he has had interest in immaterial things, right?
well, that's seemingly. But yeah, when you reduce people to just random atoms that collided together by chance, then billions of years later, you don't end up with any transcendental aspect of your humanity. And when you erase that, which again, that's kind of what the system has been designed to do for many years, is just reduce humans down to just scientific cogs that fit into a machine. And that's where you see the whole Davos, you own nothing to be happy, you're just work monkey work. And
Yeah, just be a wage slave and
yeah,
live to pay off your credit card debt.
yeah, it doesn't work, and that's kind of what's driving a lot of the whole so-called bro revival. Is people are seeking the spiritual, they're seeking the enchantment, so to speak, and they're seeking something that transcends the era in which we live in, which is very much consumer minded, chasing the latest thing. And no, people want something that stands the test of time.
Yeah. And he says in this paragraph, whether you accept my apologies or not, I hope you can move past this and continue your lives. Remember to be good people. Now more than ever, the world needs more love. Even if you don't get it in return, please find hope, find love, and stand up to injustice.
So there's that good
Like,
person
like
mindset again.
absolutely disgusting, though. The world needs more good people. It's like, let, right after I do this thing, of course. I'm it's kind of like Jesse Pinkman and his girlfriend. We're gonna quit tomorrow after we do this one thing. After we just use up all our supply tonight. We're gonna quit tomorrow. It's just absolutely yeah, that's disgusting. Uh, I mean, you do mention in this paragraph, there's notes referencing Palestine. I do want to kind of allude to the other part because the last paragraph, I don't have that in front of me, but the last paragraph of the manifesto, there's like a PS, and
Yeah,
it's like admonishing the sister to reconcile with the mother, and
yeah,
it's like just absolute turd this person is, and I
yeah.
got that
I'll,
it
I'll
was
read. I'll read it out loud.
okay.
Um, T. So that's presumably Teresa, the sister. Get over yourself and make up with mom. She loves you. You need to grow up and accept that time just keeps on fucking moving. You either will stay in the past and rot, wasting your life and happiness away, or you will grow up and move on from things. We all love you. And PPS is I wouldn't recommend any of you to read my journals unless you really want to, but be warned.
Yeah, like these are like it's just entirely ironic that giving that life advice while you're doing that. I mean, like even Jordan Peterson wasn't that hypocritical. So, that's again, there's like a reluctance to commit evil that I just found just that made it even darker, in my opinion. That, again, I do believe we're living in a supernatural world. I think if you remember the movie Nefarious, Steve Dace's movie, and in that movie, the person in the end did not want to be trapped by a demon, but he allowed the demon to come into him. And Steve Dace absolutely just undermined and knifed his own movie by having like a 10-minute scene with Glenn Beck in it, which he insists was for the believers in the audience. Like, he thought that the Christians needed that scene. And it was like the worst scene in the movie. It, like, undermined the entire movie to have Glenn Beck in the movie. But
Yeah.
uh, nevertheless, in that movie, I actually thought it did a really good job of portraying demon possession. It started off. There's like a throwaway line about the guy getting into his grandmother's Ouija board or something like that, and ultimately, like, the demon gives him some lucid moments and then comes back. And there's a very tragic scene in that movie involving one of those scenes, but though the demon has a huge influence on what he does, uh, the guy that's demon possessed in the movie still knows that ultimately he is the one responsible for everything that's happened, and that him getting sentenced to death is just. So, I get that vibe from reading the self deletion note and basically from everything else that we know. I get that vibe. There's some lucidity. There's a little bit more lucidity in those ramblings than the other manifestos and nonsense that we've read from other people, if that makes sense.
I mean, again, that's more the note, the left behind note than the manifesto, but obviously there is probably going to be some overlap. And that was probably written sooner or more recently than the notebook, which was in Cyrillic and with English phonetics, which probably takes a lot of time to like go through I guess, the code.
Yeah. I mean, AI translators, I'm not exact. I
Yeah,
mean,
I don't know how much stock to put in that.
yeah. Especially, I mean, the AI, I guess, was smart enough to pick up that it was a code, but other than that, uh, I guess, you know, I think that this story is proof of demon possession being real, and I think more people are waking up to that. There's I guess, I don't, was it James Kirkpatrick? Is who I'm thinking of, that said, "I'm not sure I believe in demon possession, but I'm starting to wonder." Or
He's not a believer at all, but he is on the right, so to speak.
right. So yeah, and he's like a noticer's noticer, I gather. But yeah, he had a very viral post about that, and Aaron McIntyre got in on that. But it's like, yeah, we best start believing in demons in a supernatural world because you're living in one. And what exactly is the answer? Because the Catholics have like an exorcism ministry, and then there's like that one. There's a famous Protestant that has a not a deliverance exorcism ministry, but for the most part, this type of supernatural phenomenon has kind of been neglected by Protestants, in my opinion. Uh,
Yeah, it is kind of a fine line between how you adequately address something that is spiritual and is very real without dive or becoming the deliverance ministry, having, some kind of revival service and some hyper charismatic cringe fest. Like, how do you walk that fine line? And again, I'm not too aware of those that do.
yeah, I mean, there's one guy. People have brought him up before. I think he's Lutheran. I'm having trouble with the names, but yeah, there's like one guy that I'm aware of that or he's Presbyterian. I think he's Presbyterian actually. Uh,
He's going to burn the witches.
yeah, I mean there was a time when there was some witch burning, and people apologize for that, and it's like no, it's in God's law to burn a witch, and because people don't believe in the supernatural. So we look back on that, like Protestantism, or not Protestantism, let's say Christendom was so broadly successful at defeating demonic forces that uh, people became convinced that the world was less spiritual because there was less demonic force, less supernatural evil activity, like less witchcraft, less fewer
Yes,
mediums and
this
stuff like
this is
that.
recorded by Eusebius. Augustine talks about the notion of and again, he's citing other authors. But yeah, and I think even the Romans would actually attest to the fact that the world was becoming less supernatural in their age. The famous Greek oracles were less reliable than they used to be. It was kind of like you go to them for your fortune telling rather than like you're about to go to war and risk millions or thousands of lives. So you go to the oracle. That part had largely died off, and basically it was just a fortune teller you go to for a lot less prestigious than in Rome's day than it was in like the height of the
Yeah, the Oracle, the Pythia in
yes.
Delphi and stuff like that.
So again, this is attested to throughout the early Christian history is that the magic was dying, so to speak, and again they do attribute that to Christ. That when Christ came, he defeated the all the devilish magic. And again, you do see that in the Book of Acts with Paul going into the town and like casting out demons. Obviously, I think there's the story with the witch. Um, yeah, there's a story of a witch of witchcraft in the Book of Acts. Which again, if you watch the show of Rome, it's just like wow, this stuff is pretty real. Like you see like the cow's heart with they do some kind of weird pagan ritual. So it's like yeah, it kind of and then you watch the show or then you read the Book of Acts and it's just like okay, yeah, you're seeing a lot of the overlap.
Yeah, and in America specifically, we had to deal with all the Native American paganism, and that's what was sort of being, fought against on a spiritual level. The principalities and powers, uh, those spiritual powers were the demonic forces that the Native
Yes,
Americans
and
channeled,
the
and
book
to some degree, the Aztec, in Mexico, the demonic forces are still kind of at large because what do the cartels all channel? They channel that demonic energy.
yeah the book Albion Seed, which shout out to the OGC for doing that as a on American Spirits, their Monday podcast. But yeah, they talk about the book talks about the perception of nature in the American colonies. And yes, they had a vastly different view of the woods and like the forest than that same view in Europe. Because again, the spiritual, I guess the spiritual energy of the woods in like the American colonies was a lot darker than being out in nature in Europe at that same time. So a lot maybe that's a lot of the Indian paganism that's kind of just like lingering. And of course, then you have witches in Salem.
Now, another instance of this in Scripture is when Jesus is crossing the Sea of Galilee and going to the other side, to the Decapolis side of the sea, and they have a storm, a giant storm, and the 12 disciples are afraid and they're fearing, and Jesus is fast asleep, unbothered by the storm. And you got to think about, and even when they land on the shore, they run into the demoniacs. So this is a venture into enemy territory that Jesus is undergoing. And that storm, my interpretation is that storm was not from God. That storm was from, you know, the other side. That storm was from the Baals or the Astras, the demons sent that storm, whipped up that storm, and that is why Jesus is unbothered. And Jesus shows up and just calms it because he has that much power over them. They threw the storm at Jesus on his boat going across the lake. Because I gotta kind of also say, like, how bad could a storm have been on the Sea of Galilee? Like, how bad could a storm have made and
Because it's
waves.
beneath sea level, like that entire river basin's beneath sea level. I just wonder if it's like trapped in like a vortex, and that's why it could get very choppy. But
But
that'd be my theory, but I'm not a meteorologist.
but who is the storm from? Okay, that's your theory as to how it could be bad, but like, who is the storm from? I think the storm was from Satan, satanic forces, and Jesus just calms the storm like that, like it's no big deal because he's coming, he's going across the lake, he's gonna get after some demons, and then he's gonna go back to the people that he was actually reaching. So yeah, and Robert kind of points that out. The demon sees Jesus from far away and says, our time has not yet come. So yeah, there is a binding of uh, these. Satan to some degree, he's the strong man. He's bound. That doesn't mean he has no power on this earth, but he is nevertheless kind of bound to let the gospel spread. And you know, his supernatural forces are going to die on. And I would imagine that the reverse can also happen, that they can also be rekindled by the apostasy of the West. So I guess that might be a note that we can talk about. Like, well, I don't know how much of this is going on in Europe, which is actually far more apostate. But in America, to some degree, maybe we didn't finish cleansing the land of the demonic forces, that the Native Americans channeled, especially out west. We're all the California hippie types that have spiritual experiences and stuff, like some that type of vibe. But guess where I'm going? Can those latent forces that maybe weren't completely eradicated? Can they rekindle throughout the entire nation if we go apostate? And
Eh,
I think
that
it's
is
very
certainly
possible.
something interesting because again, I do believe curses can follow the land, not just the people. Which is why even nations like Egypt are cursed, not just the people of Egypt. Or same thing with what would be the biblical land of Philistine being the Palestinians or even Tunisia. So I do believe a lot of nations can be cursed. Even the land is cursed at times. And yeah, you do see that given that America's only been here 200 or what 400 years since the first colonists showed up. So with that in mind, Europe being around for 1,000 years might mean it might have a little bit of a slower decay because you still have all these old cathedrals, you still have all these old buildings, and again, they're not necessarily being taken over by demonics per se. Though again, that did happen in France with the French Revolution, but instead they're getting the Muslims back. The incursions into Europe are actually going to succeed at their current rate
Yeah,
versus
and that's
versus America, which yeah, obviously still has a little bit more of a lingering, I guess, demonic practice from again being still only a couple centuries removed.
right. And there's still a lot of territory in the United States that is not really settled. Libertarians complain whenever you show the map of like federal lands and stuff like that. Uh, and who knows how the reservation system might keep things going as well. But uh, Robert says he won't be able to show land equal nations with any consistency, and I don't think you're saying it's an always type
I'm
situation,
not saying
but
it's always, but I do think Egypt as a nation is cursed. That they will never be a world power again, and that
does
doesn't.
that have more to do with the curse of Ham?
In part, yes, but obviously you do see how God curses nations, and those seem to be perpetual. Like Tyre has never been rebuilt, and again, that's in Ezekiel. It's never been rebuilt after Alexander destroyed it, and even though the remnants of what was once a great port city are just some weird shanty fishing town, it's never been rebuilt. So the land itself is still kind of cursed, even
Yeah,
though it was the people that were the recipients at the time.
Oh, I do think it's interesting that uh, there's never been a Hamite power since Carthage. Like that was like their last go. Were the Carthaginians,
But again,
who were a very underrated world power,
I
very
would
underrated
argue
empire.
again. I would argue in part, not necessarily like in totality. It would seem that even a lot of the Hamite nations are more or less cursed,
Yeah.
or at least they only had prosperity under subjugation.
No, or they peak early. And that's
Yes.
kind of like the interesting thing because I think they would have had the Assyrians, they would have had the
No, Assyrians.
Phoenicians.
They would have
Okay.
had. Yeah, they would have had Egypt, Phoenicians, Canaanites.
Yeah.
So they.
And others, but what's interesting is that, there's whole people groups that we're not really sure where they're descended from. Like, the Chinese, we're only guessing whether they're from Japheth or Shem or a mix of the two or whatever. Like, no one really knows. Uh,
Like I
so
would argue, Egypt now is more genetically all three. So
yeah, Egypt is very mixed at this point, especially when you import a bunch of slaves in there and everyone's kind of conquered it, and Greeks got in on it, Muslims got in on it. You know, what isn't the ancient Egyptian? How much lineage is there to that? So anyway, a lot of stuff going on. You know, definitely a believer in the supernatural, and the irony is that I'm not like big on like the spiritual gifts conversation is very interesting, and maybe it's time that we can delve into the continuation versus the cessation of spiritual gifts because I guess my nuanced position, and I think this would qualify as cessationism, is like I believe in like faith healing, but I don't believe in faith healers. Like I think people like Benny Hinn are like absolute con artists, but I do believe that faith healing does exist. I know people that have said I know stories of faith healing happening when people pray for the healing of someone and it happens. Like faith healing does happen, but it doesn't happen as a gift. And that I think is the nuance as far as like the other things, like, instances of prophecy. Yeah, they probably do happen, but they're not really gifts. And a lot of people start prophetic ministries just so they can babble, but do they ever like prophesy anything meaningful? So I'll let you weigh in on that. I'm sure you have a more historic Protestant perspective on that one.
no, I kind of wish that, but obviously, Calvin and Church, and they didn't really talk about miracles. Like they might have affirmed miracles happened in their day, but they didn't necessarily talk about it as much as we do because I don't know. Anytime I always want to begin the conversation with pointing out that Pentecostals got the name Pentecostals because they asserted that the sign gifts reemerged and that they're the second Pentecost. So, and again, that has eschatological significance. So that's where I would want to begin a conversation, just because you again what you said about miracles and supernatural things do still happen. God still does perform miraculous signs, and obviously prayer does have power to it. But yeah, I don't like the fact that a lot of this gets bogged down because you have a bunch of crazies that emerged in the late 1800s, early 1900s who basically had a premillennial eschatology and thought that they could do. And again, a lot of them had female preachers too, and so forth.
Like Foursquare was a denomination founded by a female. It's also the official church of Forrest Gump, by the way. Uh, anyway, yeah, that's a good point. And I remember when I read Wayne Grudem's systematic theology, he put the continuation debate towards the end, and he mentioned in the book that he did not that until recently this chapter would not have been included in most systematic theologies. So that's probably why there isn't really a historic a lot of past systematic theologies did not deal with that issue.
Well, because you didn't have people asserting that Pentecost had happened again.
Yeah, second Pentecost. So yeah, it's good to know the history of your faith tradition. And yeah, I don't think most Pentecostals even know that or would even agree with that.
Yeah, they might soften it to like a continuationist position.
Right.
But again, that's not why they bear the name.
Have you listened to Ryan Denton on hypercessationism? And yeah, short answer to that is no. And here's the thing, like I'm going to pick on Mark Driscoll for a second because he makes a lot of bad arguments against cessationism, but he's arguing against hypercessationism, which my understanding of hypercessationism is basically the belief that God doesn't do any supernatural works anymore. Like it goes beyond whether we're just talking about spiritual gifts and just whether even these miracles even happen at all is kind of what I think what I understand the line between hyper cessationism and just your average everyday cessationism. So that would be my understanding of that line. Uh,
I'm not too familiar with Ryan Denton.
I feel like I know the name and maybe I've seen some content, but I not that content. Uh, and Didymus says we was Japheth. Yeah, yeah, probably, because I will say this: like some of the people, they want for some reason they think that it's good to claim that Europeans are the descendants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. It's like, first of all, no evidence of that. Second of all, why would you want that to be true? Like, why would you want that to be your legacy? That you are the descendant of the apostate tribes that went along with Ahab and all this other nonsense. Like, is that really the legacy and history and heritage you want? So yeah, yeah, I'm fine with we was JPEG. Like I'm fine with that. Like, uh, I don't want to I don't feel the need to insert myself to get some of that chosen people complex, which some people have. So anyway, I think that's all I got for today. You have any final thoughts?
Oh, no, no, no. I think we covered quite a bit on the shooter as far as what we could. Obviously, we can't show the videos, but
Yeah, YouTube will nuke us, and not worth it. Not worth getting nuked over that.
again, it is an instance of there being more spiritual factors at play. And again, you see behavior and lifestyle choices that are self destructive, both to the individual and to the society.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good way to conclude it. White evangelicals, lone bulwark, as Stephen Wolfe famously proclaimed back in 2023, I think. Uh, and people got very up in arms about that. But on the issue of transgenderism, everyone else folded. Like 10 years ago, 2015, so this is right after Obergefell. This is also the year of, the Bruce Jenner and the ESPYs, I think was 2015, right? And then 2016 was, they were making fun of bathroom bills. Everyone had folded on this issue except for white evangelicals. Like, our society came that close to breaking on this issue permanently, like the Europeans. Uh, Actually, Europe hasn't really folded on this issue as much,
Yeah, part of
but
it is almost like a moral hazard where they realize, oh, their national healthcare systems are going to have to pay for this, and they don't want to do that.
yeah, it might be. Yeah, it's kind of more like that.
It's almost like they had a built-in like financial mechanism to essentially stop them from going full bore.
Yeah. But in America, we were going to go full bore, and many places want to and still want to go full bore. And yeah, it was basically white evangelicals held the line long enough that the culture changed against changed and turned against transgenderism hard. And it took a lot of suffering for people to do that. It took a lot of being made uncomfortable for people to want to turn because the morality wasn't convincing enough. They needed to face consequences. They needed to be disgusted by their own choices. And then so many people pretended, even past like 2021, this wasn't a thing a couple of years ago. And now all of a sudden it's everywhere. It's like, no, it was a thing. You just were willfully not paying attention. Because again, the Bruce to Caitlyn Jenner thing was like 2015. And everybody clapped. Except for Brett Favre, who didn't clap hard enough. So anyway, and South Park made fun of that, and they were pretty midwit at the time, and they were pro transgenderism at that time. So anyway, last little monologue. That's all I got for tonight. My name's Ray. This is Anthony. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. Do also hit the like button on your way out and subscribe if you are new. That helps with the magical YouTube algorithms the most. Have a blessed day. Stay based. Christ is King, and we will catch you on